Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was a very famous female celebrity. I don't know how she got famous, history doesn't recount. Maybe she'd been on their equivalent of the X Factor. But she was a beautiful singer. And she lived in a huge mansion, and she had her own stylist, her own hairdresser, her own Botox injector, her own gynecologist. She had everything, except love. She longed for the boy who lived next to her on the street before she got famous. He was a plumber. She'd never even told him that she loved him, but she did. So as she lay awake at night in her mansion, she wondered how she could get to him and tell him how she felt. She thought, maybe I'll just show up in the street one day in my huge limousine, and I'll come out in my absolutely best finery, and he will fall at my feet. But then she thought, if that happens, I won't know if he really loves me. He'll be so impressed, and he might just be after my money. So she thought and thought and thought. And in the end, she decided she was so unhappy, she would genuinely become someone he might be able to approach and see if he loved. So she sold her big mansion, she laid off her staff, she got rid of the gynecologist, she never liked him anyway, and she bought a tiny little house on the street where the plumber lived. And they met, and he loved her, and they lived happily ever after. Now, what she did was to make space for him. She already had him in her inner space, and she made physical space for him in her life as well. And possession is about making space for people. It's about getting over yourself so that others can enter in. For religious people, it can be God, him or herself, who enters in. Christians ask for God's Holy Spirit to fill them up. St. Paul talks about having the mind of Christ, actually becoming like Christ, being so filled with Christ. But it can just be someone ordinary. When I was a student, I had a friend who absolutely loved Dr. Feelgood, the band, and Lee Brillo was his hero. He was very cool. And in any kind of difficulty or uncertainty, he would think, what would Lee do in this situation? And he would be guided. He was possessed by Lee Brillo. It doesn't have to be someone who's alive. I think I'm rather possessed by my great-gran. Some people say I even talk like her. She's absolutely part of me, even though she's not with us still. I think we don't celebrate enough those people who do make space for others, who've got a genius for letting other people come in. I work at Lancaster University, and as a post office on campus, like Glasgow University, there are thousands of foreign students. They have extremely complex posting needs and demands. If you're in the queue, it can take a long time. The woman who works in that post office has time for everyone. She realises it's not just an annoying inquiry, it's someone who's far from home, they're lonely, it matters that their parcel goes back to China or whatever. She lets them in to her space for the moment she's with them in a really transformative way. We tend to celebrate people who are big, who make themselves big, who sell themselves, who show themselves. We don't celebrate enough those people who make space for others. But we don't need to be huge. We don't need a big mansion. We don't need to dominate every conversation we're in. We don't need to sell ourselves the whole time. We need to get over ourselves sometimes and just open up a bit. And then we'll be more connected. And we might even find we end up a bit bigger. Thank you.